So I have a question. Why do we need to keep reminding ourselves of our true nature of love and peace? Why does anger and fear seem to come more naturally? Is it to do with the cycle of the yugas we are in at the moment? In a way, it is to do with the cycle of the yugas, because as we discussed at the last retreat and in other videos, that the states of consciousness that we experience are pretty much defined by where we exist in time. In the dark ages, all you'd be thinking about is money, power, and sex, more than likely, surviving for most people at that time, making it past 20. And there are plenty of people in the world today that's all they are focused on because they haven't quite outgrown that mentality. But if you look around and if you pay attention to how people are living and acting, while yes, there is still that animalistic aspect of the Kali Yuga, there is an emphasis on more understanding, trying to understand people. There is more of an emphasis on imagining what it would be like if we could really get along. And there is more of an emphasis on realizing that things like war and stuff like that, really, if you asked a lot of people, more people nowadays would say, yeah, I'd prefer that we didn't get involved in wars, versus, say, in the Kali Yuga, when you were just tribal, and if you needed to go take something over, by God, you just went and you did it. There was no one sitting around saying, yeah, but is war really a good thing? And if there were, they were in the minority. But on the other hand, we have to remember that we have a human body. And the human body is a wonderful gift. However, the human body still possesses animal qualities. It still has instincts. It still has hormones. It still has ancestral memories. And we have to put it into perspective that the human body is a stage in the evolution of consciousness. And again, studying Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science helps us to understand this, but it's a hard thing to talk about until you've experienced some level of, evolving or transformation. Because as long as you have a human body with the hormones, with the instincts, with the ancestral memories, well, as a yogi, we're meant to become aware of that. And once we become aware of it, then we become conscious of the possibilities. And as we become conscious of the possibilities, now it's up to us as yogis to start choosing. Do we want to let fear and anger dominate our lives? Do we? Once you become conscious, then you have a responsibility to decide, do I want to do that? And if the answer is no, then you practice yoga, then you live a life that starts to weed that out, then you get your counseling to deal with the traumas, which make it easy for you to be angry and fearful. And you start growing. You start putting to work this gift, this spiritual temple, so that you are able to rise above those things. Not spiritually bypass them, not ignore them, not repress them, just see them in perspective to the wholeness of life and to what you are as spirit. And once you start to see that, then this body becomes, in a sense, a sacred temple. And maybe while you're alive in this body, you reach that inner state, which Sri Yukteswar might call the angelic or the sannyasin state, where you are an adept, a master, an accomplished yogi. And then you can just abide there and you can go on living out your physical days here, knowing that the physical days will eventually end, but then you will, since you already know you are spirit, there'll be no problem making the transition into the lighter realm, or a realm where you're not bound to the body or experiencing this physical body. And that is part of the process of yoga. That's what we're aiming to do. But it does require the hard work of acknowledging fear and anger and making peace with and dealing with and responding appropriately to those things while choosing a higher path. This is not a path. This is not a path that many people are going to take. And even the people who say they're interested in it rarely are taking it, because it requires daily this attention to detail of realizing, okay, I'm fearful, I'm angry today. Well, am I going to just let that persist because I either don't have the energy reserves to deal with it or because I'm lazy? Now, I make this distinction because some people are in situations where they are so traumatized, where they do not have any support, that they actually just do not have the energy or the capacity to do this, to attend to these things. It's just not there. And it's no real fault of their own. It's just a situation. However, again, this is why yoga is so important, because if you recognize that you don't have the energy or the capacity or the reserves and the strength to work through anger and fear, well, then that's when you have to say, I'm going to start getting them. I'm going to start piece by piece, little by little, step by step, considering how can I set better boundaries in my life? How can I find someone to help me just look at these traumas, which make me react in ways that aren't really healthy consistently day after day? And once you start intending for that to happen, you start just reaching a little bit at a time to make that possible. Eventually you start getting a little more energy and your reserves fill up just a teeny weeny little bit, but that's a little more energy for you to continue doing the work, for the work of self-development, of self-care, until eventually you get enough reserves that you get like a breakthrough moment. And then you can set your life up so that instead of just getting by on the fumes, the petrol or the gasoline fumes, now your tank is actually filling up and you're going to have the energy to actively engage in yoga in a profound way, so that when fear comes up, when anger comes up, when depression comes up, you don't just say, man, I don't have it. I just don't have it now. I can't deal with it now because I'm so depleted. Now it's okay. I've got the energy. I know what needs to be done. I'm going to do it. I'm going to practice yoga. I'm going to live according to the yamas and niyamas. I'm going to explore those qualities in chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita that relate to having a divine destiny. And then you recognize the work of your life is this, essentially. So that's one side of it. The other side is you just don't care and you are lazy. And a lot of people do that because they have so much going for them. They have technological things in their life which would give them all the time in the world if they would just accept it, and they would cut out all the unnecessary stuff. They have a good family that doesn't trouble them too much. They have enough money to pay their bills and to eat good food and to do what they need to do, but they're comfortable there. And so they don't go anywhere else. They just want to remain comfortable. And so yoga and meditation for them isn't really about this profound process that it's meant to be for us to evolve and transform through consciousness. It's just a way to stay comfortable in this earth realm. And you may recall, I'm sure you do, that one time Mr. Davis was with Yogananda and they were walking around this property together, and Yogananda was talking, and finally he said, do you have any questions, to Mr. Davis? And Mr. Davis always said he never really went with questions. He just wanted to be in Yogananda's presence. And one question popped up. He said, how many of the saints, how many of the teachers or gurus in Autobiography of a Yogi, the people that he met, the yogis that he met, how many of them are actually fully self-realized and enlightened? And he said, Yogananda came right back and said, not many. Not to be judgmental, he just said, not many. He said, many of them are so content to hang out in that peacefulness, that bliss of God communion, that they don't go any further. It's comfortable for them. But he said, you must go all the way. And so I'm saying this to you as well. You must go all the way if you have the ability and the energy to do it. And if you don't, you need to work on it. So we always need to keep this in mind. And of course, it's okay to reach plateaus. You know, maybe you've been struggling so much in your life that finally you filled up your reserves and you just want to feel good for a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. That's completely understandable. But at some point in time, you have to look around and say, okay, I'm strong again. I have the reserves that I need. And I know that this life is meant for so much more than just dawdling around and eking out a few pleasures here and there. And so you begin recommitting to the process. And the process doesn't have to be stressful in any way. That's one of the difficulties that we have to keep in mind that many people suffer from who get involved in yoga and meditation. While some people get involved in it because they're trying to get away from pain, some people get involved in yoga because they just want to be perfect. They have an idea of perfection, and spiritual perfection is top of the list. So we get a lot of type A, highly driven people who are doing it because they have some kind of minor inferiority complex, and they're just trying to be a perfect, good person. And that, in a way, keeps stressing them out because you're never going to reach that point where you're this perfect person that you expect to be. You can have perfect spiritual realization, but that has nothing to do with this idea of a perfect expression of a human in the world. There were sages, Durvasa, who had great anger issues and would curse people all the time. There are sages who experienced great adversity. So the idea of a perfect physical human experience needs to be released, and moving into that perfect awareness of observing, of witnessing, of seeing things as they are directly. Now that's okay. But we need to be very conscientious about our motivations. And that's hard. I mean, that's again why teachers, gurus are so important, because using that idea of the mountaintop where they can look down and see things, they can sometimes see through some of your complexes. They can see if you're just really trying too hard because you just want to be seen as perfect or as a good person. They can see whether you're just being lazy. They can see whether maybe you just don't have the capacity to understand things yet. Or they can see if you're just so tapped out that you don't even have the reserves to really process and feel and experience higher states of consciousness, because what you need is a nap. What you need is rest. And that is the role of the teacher and the guru. And that's why they can be so valuable. And that's why it's important to try to find the best guidance that you can. And you know that you've got good guidance when you apply what you've been taught in time, not immediately, sometimes immediately, but usually through consistent application results in greater peace of mind, greater awareness of your states of consciousness, and greater understanding of spiritual texts and what is being shared by spiritual teachers that you've respected, or maybe from the past. That's usually the best way of gauging it, not whether you have blissful surges of ecstasy and all these types of things. In my experience, you're all here, so I don't need to tell you all this, but just for the sake of reiteration, it's very good to have a teacher that is part of an embodied lineage, meaning it can be traced back. One teacher met the other teacher, studied with the other teacher, and so on. Because there are many people these days that can just say, oh, Babaji came to me in a dream, or down from a spaceship, or I was initiated in some reverie of meditation. Whether that's true or not, I can't really comment. I'm usually skeptical of those types of things. Now, if they have good information, we'll try it out. But I'm usually skeptical. Of course, we have to remember that myself and like you, we have the luxury of having met people who are part of an embodied lineage. And so when you've got that luxury, it makes it easy to say things like I'm saying right now. But if you don't have that luxury, of course, you take what you can get. And you hope that God and the guru is the infinite consciousness is working appropriately through whomever you happen to have in front of you to share and guide and teach you. And of course, that is always a possibility. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to another question you have here.